I see Kelsey set up my mics for me, so.
Yeah.
No. Thank you very much. This is the Edmond Jazz Orchestra, and man, what a great crowd. This is awesome. Thank you so much for coming out. As we go on through the evening, we'll introduce all these folks to you. Most of you know who these people are. You've seen them on the post office walls and police blotters all over the state. One of them is wanted in Maryland, so we'll have to tell you about him later. That first tune was from the Louis Bellson Library. You can tell that was either Louis Bellson or Buddy Rich because all the drum stuff. So, and that featured Tony Romano on the drums. But of course, you couldn't have a jazz concert without featuring some other guys who really play well. So we start off with one of the best, Lee Rucker on trumpet. Kenny Vaughn on guitar. Jared Cathy on tenor saxophone. Evan Crash drum on the trombone. Floyd Haynes on alto sax. Brett Steed all the way from the greater Idabel area on a trombone. And a new addition to our group and to the area because he's been spending his time south of the border, but we won't hold that against him because he was at a pretty good school. He was at the University of North Texas playing in the 1 o'clock. This is Dr. Jack Helsley. We didn't get him because we're such a great group. It's that he hangs out with one of the chicks that goes to school here. He's married to our horn professor, Dr. Peggy Moran, so that's why. Right? It's a story, and he's sticking to it. And then you heard from this guy with the trombone over here. We just call him Doc, but it's Dr. Kent Kidwell. Me and two other people call him Dad, so you can. And then welcoming back from a 28-year hiatus by way of the United States military is Mr. Vince Norman. And last but not least, the most beautiful person in the band, Alyssa Kozlowski. Our next tune is a chart that Vince wrote under a commission by another ensemble, and it's based on a tune called Teen Town by, Jocko Pastores. Great bass player, and so, Vince, explain this to us. Stripling is what?
The tune is called, the tune that this is based on, which, I mean, this is actually a totally different tune, but it's based on the rhythm section riff that you'll hear then play. But team, another, I like using synonyms, and so a synonym for the word team would be a stripling. And another synonym for the word town is a whistle stop. That's like an old, I don't know, turn of the century town. Anyway, that's how I feel with this thing.
So this is stripling whistle stop.
I'm not a good public speaker.
As soloists on this one, you'll hear from Danny again, you'll hear from Vince, because he wrote the tune, and you'll hear from Tony again on drums. Here's Stripling Whistle Stop. next tune is a transcription that Vince did for one of his fellow Del City Eagles. There's a bunch of Del City people. There's a bunch of Del City people here to begin with. We're the Del City folks.
Yeah.
And Del City High School has a long heritage of producing great jazz musicians, and Vince is one of those people. David Smith playing Barry is one of those people. And this next guy, where he went. Oh, he didn't have that. Okay. This next guy is one of those people, and actually Dad taught at Del Crest Junior High when I was a little bitty guy. So, I mean, there's a lot of Del City connections to this group up here. But this other guy who did it, you guys have heard him play before. He played with a little band called the Maynard Ferguson Band, and also played with the United States Jazz Ambassadors, kind of the same group that Vince joined. But then Vince, pretty much the same group. But then after he was there a couple of years, they heard him arrange, then they said, well, you're too good at the arranging part, and they kind of sucked him right out of that band. So that's the only problem, I think, with the military is they find you something that you're good at, and they go, well, you're too good at that, so we're going to promote you to something that you don't like. So but luckily, he likes arranging and composing. This is one of his transcriptions, or arrangements, if you will, that he did for Paul Stevens. And this is on a tune off the M.F. Horn 1 album that Maynard did. A beautiful ballad called If I Thought You'd Ever Change Your Mind. Here's Paul Stevens. You guys follow along. You guys are ready for this?
I'm going to try to be a public speaker a little better this time. How many of you are familiar with the name Clyde Connor? Some of you've got to be. Clyde, back in the 1980s, was like the star drummer at this school. And Clyde and I, when we were both students here, when I was a student here the first time, I'm a student again now. But when he and I were students together in the 80s, we got into composing together, and he ended up actually joining the Navy Commodore's jazz band in DC, and so we were roommates for a while even there, and this is one of the tunes that he and I co-composed, and another friend of ours wrote lyrics for. And this is the first performance of it with this sax quintet and rhythm section. I hope you enjoy it.
do one more and then let you get a chance to get a frosty beverage at the bar with Kay's and the gals over there. So, and make sure and tip these people really well or else they'll put bad on. Saw some of them spitting and peeing on it. Get a letter. Our last tune of this half will be a tune that's arranged by Dave Alberg, who is a doctoral student at the University of Northern Colorado, and it's where Mr. Boyle and myself and Dr. Sharp, take the bands in the springtime to the world's largest feedlot, and when the wind is out of the east, man, does it smell good in Greeley, Colorado. But they have a great jazz studies program there, and they produce great doctoral students and folks who can compose and arrange. And this is his arrangement of a great old standard called Witchcraft. And this will feature a solo here from Brian on tenor and from Lee on trumpet, and I think that's all. So after this, make sure if you need a refreshment or a potty break, do that, because we'll be back.
Thank you.